Hello everyone! The local first movement is gaining serious momentum, and as you might know, here at Expo we are big fans of local first development. That's why I'm excited to announce our collaboration with Turso. Turso is a modern database service built on SQLite that works seamlessly both locally and in the cloud. It's fast, developer friendly, and perfect for AI applications, mobile apps, and apps that just need offline capabilities. They recently launched Offline Sync, which enables true local first development. You can now sync the full database between local and remote, support bidirectional synchronization, push local changes to the cloud, and pull remote changes. It is also possible to write to embedded replicas remotely. And yes, conflict detection is built in. No resolution yet, but still a huge step forward. And the best part? You can use Turso today with Expo SQLite library. In this video, we'll take a simple stateless node application and turn it into a full local first application using Turso Offline Sync. Let's dive into the demo. Okay, so here we have the app that we're going to be transforming into a local first application. Now, as you can see, we have this kind of pull, and we also have this push button. But actually, I just decided to call them pull and push. Each time that I press this button, the database is actually going to sync with Turso, right? So for example, let's create a hello YouTube, and let's just go ahead and press push. This is actually going to like sync the database, meaning that it's going to bring anything that we have in the cloud and it's going to push all the changes that we have locally. So if I go back, now I have two nodes, as you can see. And on the Android device, if I just go ahead and press the sync or pull button, this is going to start syncing as well the local changes and the remote, and we should end up with the same state after a moment. As you can see here, everything is being stored locally using Expo SQLite in this application. So for example, if I, start typing stuff in here, I can just go back and press pull again, which is going to sync the data, and I can just come here and press pull, and after a moment, as you can see, we end up with the same state across both devices. Now, something super cool that Turso provides is actually the ability to go and insert data directly on the platform. So if you haven't already, just go ahead and create an account in the Turso website. You're gonna need this account in a moment, but what I want to show you guys for the quick demo is that Turso allows you to create operations and see information about your database. As you can see here, this is my Notes app. And on the right, I can press this edit data, and I can actually choose between Drizzle and Outer Base Studio. So I personally prefer this one. And as you notice, we have this table nodes. So in here, I can just go ahead and say select all from nodes and run this query. And as you notice, we have some data in here, meaning that I can also write to the database from here, and my clients should end up with the same state. So I'm gonna say insert into nodes, and something super cool is that we can press Command B, and this is going to bring this AI helper. So I'm gonna take advantage of this AI agent, and I'm just going to ask to insert 5 nodes with real world title and description. Let's see what comes up with. Okay, and that was fairly quick, so I'm going to just accept this, and then let's go ahead and select this and run it. Oh yeah, and actually I see this issue is that we are adding the ID, and actually that shouldn't be the case because that should be auto-generated. So let's go ahead and quickly remove this and run this again. I'm going to select everything, run it, and just like that, we have affected 5 rows, meaning that if I come here and select everything, now we have a bunch of data. And if I go back to my client and just sync with the remote database in both devices, we should see the same state. So how cool is this? We can write data in the cloud, and then the client is going to sync. What is truly amazing is that these applications are going to work without the internet connection, and once we come online, we can trigger the sync and we're going to end up with the same state. Let's dive in and see how we can implement this using Turso. Okay, so in case you want to follow along with me, just go ahead and clone this repo that I have in here. So I'm gonna say git clone, and my repo is called Notes app. So let's go ahead and hit enter. And now we can see into the Notes app in here. We are working on the main branch. So let's go ahead and just open this in Cursor. So this is a super simple application, guys, that I actually created using Bolt. As you can see here, here's the folder. And the first thing that I want to do is just go ahead and install dependencies using Bon. So I'm going to say Bon install. So I'm going to clear the terminal, and the next thing that I want to do is install the latest version of Expo SQLite. So let's say npx expo install expo SQLite, and let's hit enter. Yeah, this is going to install the version 15.1.4, and this version is the one that you want to install because it has compatibility with Turso. Once we install this, we actually need to make a small configuration in our app.json. So come to the plugins and you'll find the Expo SQLite. Let's wrap this in brackets. And then I'm going to add this line, use leave SQLite. So let's go ahead and hit save. And basically this is going to tell Expo SQLite to use leave SQLite. For those who don't know, leave SQLite, it's a fork of SQLite. But this fork, it's as well open source, but it actually accepts contributions from the community, and it's the one that Turso uses. So we need to have this flag on. And once we add this to the plugins, this means that we need to create a development build because this is not going to work in Expo. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to open my terminal and say npx expo prebuild and hit enter. This is going to generate Android and iOS folders. On the right, I'm going to delete my Notes app just to make sure that we start fresh. And let's say npx expo run iOS. This is going to build the application in my iOS simulator. And this is the app. So super simple stuff. It's actually using just use state for the state so far. I'm going to close the app.json. And I want to quickly show you how this works. We actually have a context which is handling the state using use state. And as you notice here, we have these 3 initial nodes. And this is just, providing the nodes state so that we can iterate over them in the home screen and also display data in the details screen. So this is, like a super simple app that can update, delete, and create nodes using use state. Now, before we actually jump into integrating Expo SQLite and Turso, we need to go back to Turso website. So if you haven't created an account yet, just go ahead and create the account. And then just go to your dashboard and on the database tab, click here and create a new group. So I'm going to call my group YouTube, but you can call it offline, for example, and then just press create group. Of course, select the region that is closer to you. Let's press on create group. And as you notice, we have now this YouTube group. I had these two previously with offline and offline test. So just feel free to name it as you want. So the next thing that I want to do is just create a database in this group. So I'm going to call this one nodes YouTube and select the group, which is YouTube group, and create database. Okay, so once that is done, you should be able to see this new database that you created. From here on the right, I'm going to press on these 3 dots and then create a new token. You can set an expiration if you want to, for example, never or 1 day. I'm going to select 1 day right now. And the access for the database. So in this case, we need read and write. Let's create the token. This is going to generate this link and the token. Let's go to the app and I'm going to create a new file .env.local and I'm going to create these 2 variables. So I'm going to come back here, copy again my public DB URL and paste it in here. As you notice, it's basically the name of my app and the region. And then we also need the token, which is this one right here. So let's paste it in here and hit save. And these are the credentials that we need to start writing to our Turso database. So I'm going to close this. I can come back here and just close this. In a moment, we should be able to see some data in here. And if you want right now, you can actually just go to the Outer Base Studio and start inserting data into this database. So right now we don't have any tables or anything. And it's totally okay. Actually, I want to show you how we can create tables directly from the client. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing that I want to do is go to my entry point of my app, which is this layout. By the way, these tabs are not being used, so I'm just going to delete them. This app was generated by AI. So let's select the layout. And in here, I'm going to wrap this into the SQLite provider from Expo SQLite. So let's wrap our app. This is going to look something like this, but this is going to take a couple of properties. First of all, the database name. My database name, it's actually nodes YouTube, and you can come here and copy if you want to. So I'm gonna say nodes YouTube. Then we need to specify some options. So I'm gonna say options, and inside the options, I can say leave SQL options. This is going to take a URL as well as a token. And as you might know by now, we can grab this from the process. So I'm going to add an exclamation point since I already know that these values are never going to be null. Of course, this is breaking right now because we need to write some functions. So I'm just going to hit and stop the server. Let's just close the app for now. I'm going to close the terminal as well. So these are the required properties for the provider. But we can also pass this on init function to the provider, which is a custom initialization handler to run before rendering the children. So I'm going to call this function in here, and this actually gets the database from Expo SQLite, and this is going to be an async function. Now, because we are using Turso, the first thing that I want to do here is just go ahead and sync my local database with the remote one. So we can take this database and say await db.sync live SQL. Now, something important to notice, guys, is that this function sync live SQL is going to be just available when we have the live SQL integration enabled. And that's what we did with the plugin, right? So it's a great idea to wrap this into a try catch like this. Now, after this, I'm going to start by defining my database version. And then I want to run a migration in case that we don't have, anything, right? So the first time that we launch the app, this actually should run. So I'm going to paste this result variable, which is using pragma user version. And this is a special command in SQLite, and it's used to query the database settings. So this is going to get me the version. And then we can change if the current version of the database is greater than my database version that I define here, which is version 1. If that's the case, then no migration is needed and we can safely return. But if that's not the case, what I'm going to do is just check if the current version is equal to 0. So in that case, we actually want to create the table notes, right? And start, just getting ready to start saving data. So in this case, I'm just creating this await db execution async, which is going to run this create table if not exist, and then it's just passing the nodes fields, which is going to have an ID and then a title, content, and modify date. Then I'm just adding a console log that is, gonna say initial migration applied with the DB version. Then we set the current DB version to be equal to 1. And after this, I'm just going to run this pragma user version and set this to be the database version. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit save. This is kind of like a fairly long on init function, so it's actually not super complicated, just validating and migrating if we don't have anything. So I'm just going to minimize this. And this is all the setup that we need, guys. So I'm going to start the server again. I'm gonna say npx expo start. Just make sure that you are using dev client. I'm going to press S. This is going to switch to use the development client, and then press I to open this in the simulator. And something happened, right? So the application loaded super quickly and the initial migration was applied. Okay, so that's cool. Now we can come to the nodes context, which is where the state of my application lives, and we can start using SQLite. So I'm going to start by updating my context type, and I'm just going to add the sync nodes function. I'm going to just minimize this dummy initial state, and inside the provider, we can grab the database using the hook use SQLite context. So let's use this from Expo SQLite. This is going to return the database. So let's go ahead and create a function to fetch the nodes. And it's going to be using use callback hook. So let's import this from React. This is an async function that is going to just run select all from nodes ordered by modified date descending. That's all. Once we get the nodes, we are setting the state that we have in here. So instead of having this initial state, I'm going to have just an empty array. And actually, we can improve the type by saying that this is going to be an array of nodes. And at the beginning, it's going to be an empty array. And I'm going to delete this dummy data in here. We don't need it anymore. And I have a little warning here. This is because now I need to provide the sync nodes function. And let's go ahead and create this sync nodes. So I'm going to just have this empty function for now. We are going to implement this in a moment, but if I go ahead and hit save, you can see that in the logs, we have the no migration needed the couple times that I've been saving, and because we already migrated, right? And we have the version 1 already in there, but we don't have any data yet. But now we are using SQLite for the state, which is super cool. Now for the sync note, this function is actually going to be super easy. Let me just go ahead and paste this in here. This is going to just put this in the console so that we know that we are syncing. And then using use callback as well, this is an async function. I'm going to have a try catch, and then I'm just going to call my my sync leave SQL, and that's it. So after I sync, I want to fetch the nodes again, which is going to just query the local database, which should now have data after syncing, right? If there was data to sync. And then after that, we're just putting in the console sync nodes with TursoDB. And that's it. So now I can just hit save, and we should be able to use these sync nodes anywhere in the app. We need to update our previous functions, like the create node. This is just setting state in the use state variable. And we actually want to run a query in here. So I'm going to, first of all, change this to be an async function. And then we can run async from the database, and then run this insert into. And I'm going to just pass the title, content, modify date. After this, if you notice, we are returning the node. So instead of setting the nodes, I want to fetch the nodes again. Then I need to return the new node. So this is going to be an object with the new node. And then I'm grabbing the ID and putting it inside this object as well from the result. The result is in here. So this is going to come with the ID of the new item. Now let's go with update node. So as you notice, I'm kind of handling this in a special way, because to update a node, I'm passing the ID and some updates, which is some of the fields that we are updating, because we could update the title or just the description or both. So we need to handle that accordingly. You could please feel free to improve this if you want to. So the first thing that I want to do is just change this to be an async function. And then let's run this get first async. This is going to get the node, or check if the node exists, and it's going to get me all the data. So you don't have to worry about querying the database, right? Because this database lives locally, and we can do a bunch of queries instantly. So I'm just getting the node each time that we call this function. If the node does not exist, we are just returning. Then I want to check which fields we are updating, or kind of merge what we are passing in the updates with what we have in the existing node. So I'm going to create this object, which is just merging everything. And once I have the updated node, I can run my update, and this is how it looks. I'm just running update nodes, set either title, content, everything, and we're passing these to according to the updated node in here. And then once we update the database, I'm refetching so that we have the latest state. Okay, so let's hit save. Let me close this. And now let's go with the delete node. This is going to be super simple as well. It's just going to run delete all from nodes where the ID is equal to the ID that we are passing in the parameter. And then we refetch to update the UI. And that's basically it, guys. Now down here, create node is complaining because this is now an async function, which means I have to update this to return a promise. Same for everything else. Now we have a little warning here, and this is because the type number is not assignable to a type string. Okay, so let's just cast this using a string, and I think this should fix the issue. Okay, and now we're ready to start using this context in our application. Now the next thing that I want to do, guys, is go to my index. Yeah, and in here we're actually going to have a warning. This is because now create node is an async function, and we should await this function. Let's check the node. As you notice, we're using the node and update node as well. So let's go ahead and add the async in here for the update node. And I think this is all the changes that we need. So now let's try and add some data in our application. So let's press on plus. And this is actually going to create a new record. And if I go back, we have these untitled nodes. I also have a couple of warnings for reanimated, so we are just going to ignore those for now. Okay, guys, so one thing that I noticed is that we are not fetching the nodes on the initial load. So let's just go ahead and create a use effect in here that is going to fetch the nodes when the component mounts. So if I hit save now, each time that I refresh the application, I should be able to see the nodes that I have saved locally. And also, as you notice, I created a new one. So let me just go ahead and delete that. Awesome. So this is working. And I can come here and let's try to update. And as soon as I type, I'm actually sending this to the update and saving this directly to the database. So if I go back, you should see that now this is stored in my database. Yeah, and this actually reminds me that when we navigate to the node, we need to set these values based on the current node. So instead of finding this node in here, I want to query. So in this case, we can use the database as well by just importing this from SQLite, and then we can fetch this. Yeah, and I'm going to need to wrap this into a function. Let's import the type as well. Let me export this node type. Then we can come here and type this. Let's cast this to be a string, and then we can set the node based on the current node. This is going to set the initial values. So let's see if I navigate now, we should be able to see the title. So let's test the description. Okay, let's go back. Okay, and if I come back, we have it. Okay, cool. So now this is working perfectly fine. So what I want to do now is go to my index screen and add in the header a button. So what I'll do is just wrap this into a fragment. And then in here, I'm going to use a stack from Expo router. We can access the screen and set some options like the header right, which right now I want to be a button from React Native. So we can pass a simple title that is going to be sync. So if I hit save, now we see this button. And then when we press, we can sync the nodes and we can actually grab this from the hook. So let's open the terminal. Let's see what happens if I press this sync. You see that we have these syncing nodes, and then we have this synced nodes with Turso, which means it worked. Now, if I go to Turso and refresh, now suddenly I have this nodes table, and then I can start running queries against this table. So I'm gonna say nodes, and let's run this. And as you notice, we have the latest info. This is great because now this is going to work on every single platform. So let's build this for Android. I'm gonna say npx export run Android and hit enter. So this is going to take a minute. In the meantime, I also want to start inserting data here, right? So I can say insert into, and then I'm going to use AI because I'm too lazy for this. Yeah, I think I need to have a semicolon in here. Okay, that worked. Let's run it again. Now we have the data. So if I go back to the application, I can actually refresh and hopefully this will bring the new items. And as you notice, I didn't press sync. And what is happening here is that on the layout, if you remember in the onInit function, we are just syncing directly every time that we load this. And before we render anything, we are making sure that we are syncing. And as well, the Android build is ready. So I can show you guys that if I refresh, we should see the items. Cool. And then we can update from this client. So let's come here and say update from Android. And if I go back and press sync, let's go and see the terminal. So if we come back, we can see the logs in here. And then on the right, I can sync, which should trigger the sync again. And as you notice, it's syncing. It took like a second or two. So I would say, guys, just be careful when you are syncing data right now, because we do detect conflicts, but we are not resolving them, which means that we could end up in a weird state in the database if we are not careful at the time of syncing. So Turso is working on conflict resolution, and maybe at the time that you are watching this video, there is a solution already. But at the time, just keep in mind that it takes, sometimes it's super quick, sometimes it takes 1 or 2 seconds to sync. So program accordingly. And that brings us to the end of this video, guys. As you notice, it's super simple to get started with Turso and start syncing your database across clients. It's also super cool to be able to insert data directly from the Turso dashboard, and your users will get this once they sync with the remote database. Also, as you notice, we didn't have to create the tables directly. We can do that from the client. So I hope you like this video. Go give this integration a try. Check out the code example, is going to be available down here. Don't forget to give it a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.